Hello and welcome to the IoT Uplink, where we discuss all the factors driving, influencing, and adding to the complexity of the Internet of Things movement for the product development and manufacturing marketplaces. My name is Jeff Ranke. I'm the editorial director of Manufacturing.NET and Advantage Business Media's manufacturing group. Joining me is the only man attracting even more NBA free agency attention than Carmelo and LeBron combined. He is the executive editor of Electronic Component News and Product Design and Development, David Manti. We've got a lot of things lined up in this episode, including talking to a leading expert on industrial machine-to-machine communications. But before we get to that, let's go over some of the facts. As we've discussed, the IoT movement is worth about $14 trillion. About a third of that tied directly to machine-to-machine communications. David, this is a complex communication environment. We can't have all this expensive automation equipment dropping a call to the packaging and processing equipment. What are some things we need to be aware of moving forward?
Thank you, Jeff. Let's check it out. Worldwide M2M connections is now 1.5 billion connections. Of that, industrial M2M accounts for 40 to 45 million connections, and by 2020, that's gonna double to more than 90 million industrial M2M connections. According to UK-based West-based technologies, that is only going to be 3% mobile, and the semiconductor global wireless sensor network is going to, what just happened to that? It's going to triple by 2020 to more than $12 billion.
To add some context to the conversation, it's my pleasure to welcome Jerry Niemi, Product Manager at B&B Electronics, to the Uplink. Thanks for joining us today, Jerry.
Hi, glad to be here today.
Just going to jump right into it. We've been talking a lot about the IoT, wireless communication, machine-to-machine communication. A lot of these premises are not new. We've talked about machine-to-machine and wireless in the industrial setting. But with IoT, it does mean some different things. Jerry, maybe you can give us your thoughts on what machine-to-machine communications really means now when we get into the Internet of Things discussion.
Well, I think the big change is that we're starting to see the price points of technology drop to a point, and we're seeing new technologies enter the marketplace that will allow us to measure and monitor things on a scale that wasn't previously financially viable. You know, certainly there's been wireless networks, wireless sensor networks for many years. B&B's been in the business for 15 years now, but we're developing a whole new line of products. And the difference that we're seeing is that we could build networks now that could scale on scaling on factors that were not previously doable. So instead of having a network of, say, 20 sensors, we can now build networks of hundreds, if not thousands of sensors, and we can cost effectively pull all that data back up and actually make it useful to people where we previously would have taken that data and it would have just overwhelmed them with useless information. We can now apply technology to that to make it much more readable and useful. So it's more, instead of just raw data, it's now information.
At Sensors Expo 2014 this year, you were showing an IoT industrial tank application. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the industrial applications that you're seeing IoT, be a better fit for?
Yeah, the sky's the limit almost in the applications that you see. And when you look at B&B and companies like us that are entering this space, they start talking about horizontal, vertically oriented products, right? So the sensor networks themselves become very horizontal and can cut across applications, hundreds of applications, places that previously weren't usable. And the way you can customize it is by tuning the specific sensors that you would need and utilize in that particular application. We're certainly starting to see in the industrial machine equipment area, people looking to monitor their machines in ways that they couldn't previously do that by just hooking a sensor network up and backhauling all that information through a wireless network through maybe our machines that are deployed worldwide for preventive maintenance types of applications. Other areas we're seeing a lot of initial interest in, surprisingly, is agriculture. And the ability to now build, because wireless can communicate over a wide scale, using moisture and soil monitors and sensors to actually monitor the fields to give the agricultural business more efficient use of their irrigation water, and then chemical deployments on the fields that they're deploying.
So Jerry, would it be fair to say that these aren't really new applications? They're really more being repositioned or rebranded for new applications?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people have been monitoring, all the applications we talked about. People have been monitoring to some extent in those areas. But typically in the past, you'd have very siloed applications. So the networks are becoming more universal. I can now monitor, as I said previously, more points with more sensors in a smaller space than I've ever had before. And I can actually no longer silo my applications, but I can monitor multiple different types of factors within that same environment simultaneously.
Okay, you're talking a little bit about the idea of connected intelligence. Can you go into how specifically that's, and you mentioned some of the applications before, how is connected intelligence, I mean, maybe just as a buzzword, benefiting industrial IoT?
Yeah, and that's one of that's obviously one of our marketing terms is connected intelligence. And the idea behind that is putting more knowledge out at the edge of the network, right? So people are now putting intelligence out at the sensor networks themselves. Previously, maybe in a SCADA application in a master-slave environment, all the intelligence would be at the master. You'd have to pull all that data out of the networks and then bring it all back to a centralized location and then monitor it through an HMI interface at some centralized location. But what we're trying to do now is push the intelligence. Costs have come down and computing resources are now more cost effective than ever. So we can take nodes where the sensors are connected and put intelligence in those. And now we can make decisions at the endpoints and not have to involve the downstream resources necessarily in the entire decision-making process. For example, deploy a sensor that's a node that's collecting information from 2 or 3 sensors. It may also have an output at that same point. So based upon things that network is detecting at a certain location, that node itself can make an intelligent decision about what's going on at that location. If it needs to turn something on and off, say the temperature is overheating, that node can detect the temperature and actually shut off whatever is causing the overheating condition right locally at that device. And now I'm not using the downstream computing resources that might be required in the back-end offices.
Interesting. Jerry, B&B recently chose to go with the MQTT Sensor Communications Protocol. Maybe you can talk us through a little bit of that decision, or were there other protocols that you investigated as well?
Yeah, there's certainly, in the IoT world, there's really no protocol, I think, that's established itself as the dominant protocol in use today. And certainly we're seeing a lot of industry consortiums forming. I think some more have just recently been announced, some ad hoc groups with companies getting together to try to say, we're going to try to standardize on an IoT protocol. And I think over the next few years, that's all going to play out to see which becomes the dominant technology communication protocol that's going to be used. But since we're in the market today and we're one of the industry leaders in this space, we had to pick something. And so MQTT was kind of the protocol we decided to pick initially to start off with. By no means are we say wed to it long term, but today we think it's going to work for the applications that would be using our type of product. Excellent.
Jerry, thanks so much for joining us on the Uplink. If people want to know a little bit more about some of the things you've talked about, where can they go on the web to see it?
Yeah, well, we're B&B Electronics, and there's a website, www.bb-elec.com. And certainly you could look up, Google our new product line, which is the Wizard sensing platform, and it's WZZARD, so there's no I in there. I suspect if you Google Wizard with no I, will be the ones you find.
Excellent. Thanks again, Jerry.
All right, thank you.
That's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to follow David and I on Twitter for more information about this program, as well as content on our related sites. For David Manti, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this has been the IoT Uplink.